Roman Audibrook Whispers on the Waves, Part 1, Chapter 1, Tides of Solitude. Avery Lawson's hands sank into the dough, the rhythm of kneading as familiar as the crash of waves outside her bakery, Tide and Tart. The pre-dawn air in Cliffhaven, Maine, carried the tang of salt and seaweed, slipping through the cracked window of her shop. Flour dusted her apron, and the oven's warmth battled the early summer chill, but the ache in her chest was colder than the ocean. It had been 2 years since the accident, 2 years since she'd lost her sister, Nora, but the pain clung like damp sand, impossible to shake. Avery pressed the dough harder, shaping it into loaves for the morning rush. Cliffhaven was a small island town, its pulse tied to the tides and the tourists who flocked to its lighthouse and beaches. Tide and Tart was her refuge, its whitewashed walls and driftwood shelves a cocoon where she could hide from the world. She didn't need friends, or love, or anything beyond the hum of her mixer and the scent of rising bread. At least, that's what she told herself. The bell above the door jingled, startling her. It was barely 5 a.m., too early for customers, even the fishermen who stopped for coffee. Wiping her hands on her apron, she stepped to the counter, her braid swinging over her shoulder. A man stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the gray dawn, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He was tall, with dark hair curling at the edges and a navy jacket that looked too light for Maine's fickle summers. "Morning," he said, his voice low but warm, like a tide rolling in. "You Avery Lawson? I'm Finn Harbour. Hear about the room upstairs." Avery blinked, her tired brain catching up. She'd posted the rental ad last week, desperate for extra cash to keep the bakery afloat. Taxes were climbing, and tourists weren't spending like they used to. But she hadn't expected anyone to show up this early, or to look like they'd walked out of a sailing magazine. "Right," she said, crossing her arms. "You're the marine biologist?" He nodded, setting his bag down. "That's me, studying the harbor seals for the summer. Your place is close to the docks, so..." He trailed off, his blue eyes scanning the bakery, lingering on the chalkboard menu and the mismatched chairs. "Smells amazing in here." Her cheeks warmed, and she cursed herself for it. "Thanks. The room's ready, but it's basic. Bed, desk, shared bath. No pets, no parties." Finn grinned, and it was disarmingly boyish, like he knew a secret she didn't. "No pets, no parties. Just me and my binoculars. You won't even know I'm here." Avery doubted that. Something about him, his easy confidence, the way his gaze held hers a beat too long, already felt like a ripple in her carefully ordered life. She grabbed a key from the drawer, sliding it across the counter. "First month's rent up front. And don't mess with the thermostat." He laughed, a sound that filled the quiet shop. "Deal. You always this welcoming to newcomers?" "Only the ones who show up before dawn," she shot back, but a reluctant smile tugged at her lips. Before Finn could respond, the door jingled again, and Mrs. Pritchard, Cliffhaven's resident gossip and lighthouse keeper, swept in. Her floral shawl was as loud as her voice. "Avery, dear, I heard you've got a new tenant." "Oh, and who's this?" Her eyes locked on Finn, sparkling with mischief. Avery groaned inwardly. "Mrs. Pritchard, this is Finn Harbour. He's renting the room." "Finn, Mrs. Pritchard runs the lighthouse and knows everyone's business." Finn extended a hand, unfazed. "Pleasure. I'm just here to study seals, not stir up trouble." Mrs. Pritchard's laugh was a cackle. "Trouble finds you in Cliffhaven, young man. And Avery could use a bit of it, locked in this bakery all day." "Mrs. P," Avery warned, her cheeks flaming. "Don't you have a lighthouse to tend?" "Plenty of time for that," Mrs. Pritchard said, waving her off. "But mark my words, this summer's got a spark in it. I can feel it." She bustled out, leaving a trail of lavender perfume and embarrassment. Finn raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "She's lively. You have no idea," Avery muttered, handing him the key. "Stairs are out back. Let me know if you need anything." He nodded, hoisting his bag. Will do. And thanks, Avery, for the room and the entertainment. As he headed for the stairs, his boots scuffing the hardwood, Avery watched him go, her pulse quicker than it should have been. She turned back to her dough, the waves crashing outside, and tried to ignore the feeling that Finn Harbor was more than a tenant, that he was a tide she couldn't hold back, no matter how hard she tried. Chapter 2. Ripples of Noise. Avery Lawson leaned against the counter of Tide and Tart, the midday sun streaming through the bakery's windows, painting the hardwood floor in golden patches. The morning rush had faded, leaving behind the hum of the coffee machine and the distant crash of waves on Cliffhaven's rocky shore. Her hands still smelled of cinnamon from the scones she'd baked, but her mind was upstairs, where Finn Harbor was settling into the rental room. His arrival yesterday had been a jolt, like a gull swooping too close, and the memory of his easy grin lingered longer than she wanted. She shook her head, grabbing a rag to wipe the counter. She didn't have time for distractions, not with the bakery's bills piling up and the summer tourist season barely keeping her afloat. But as she scrubbed a stubborn coffee stain, a thump echoed from the ceiling, followed by the unmistakable strum of a guitar. The notes were soft at first, then grew louder, a jaunty sea shanty that vibrated through the floorboards. Avery froze, her rag dangling. "You've got to be kidding me," she muttered. She'd told Finn no parties, but apparently, he thought, no noise was optional too. Dropping the rag, she marched to the back stairs, her sneakers pounding the steps as the music grew louder. The door to the rental room was ajar, and she knocked sharply, crossing her arms. "Finn?" The guitar stopped mid-strum, and Finn appeared, his dark hair tousled, a faded T-shirt clinging to his frame. He held a beat-up acoustic guitar, and his blue eyes widened with a mix of surprise and amusement. "Hey, Avery. Problem?" "Yeah," she said, her tone clipped. "Your concert's rattling my customers downstairs. I run a bakery, not a music venue." He leaned against the doorframe, the guitar dangling from one hand. "Didn't realize it was that loud. Just testing the acoustics. This place has great reverb." She raised an eyebrow, unamused. "Great. Test it somewhere else. I've got enough to deal with without a soundtrack." Finn's grin was infuriatingly relaxed. "Noted, though you might like a little music. Loosen up the vibe down there." "The vibe's fine," she snapped, but her cheeks warmed at his teasing. She glanced past him, catching a glimpse of the room, his duffel bag open on the bed, a stack of marine biology books on the desk, a pair of binoculars by the window. It was orderly but lived in, like he'd already claimed the space. Before she could retreat, the bakery's bell jingled downstairs, followed by Mrs. Pritchard's unmistakable voice. "Avery, emergency meeting." Avery groaned, pinching the bridge of her nose. "Stay quiet, okay?" she told Finn, then hurried down, her braid bouncing. Mrs. Pritchard stood in the bakery, her floral shawl clashing with the pastel walls, flanked by Mr. Callahan, the grizzled dockmaster. Both looked grim, an unusual contrast to Mrs. Pritchard's usual cheer. "What's wrong?" Avery asked, her stomach twisting. "It's the lighthouse," Mrs. Pritchard said, her voice low. "Some big-shot developer from Portland wants to buy the land. Turn it into condos. They're meeting with the town council tomorrow." Avery's heart sank. The Cliffhaven lighthouse wasn't just a landmark, it was the soul of the island, where she and Nora used to chase fireflies as kids. Losing it would gut the town, and her bakery relied on the tourists it drew. "They can't do that," she said, her voice sharp. "It's historic." Mr. Callahan snorted, his beard twitching. "Money talks, kid. Unless we rally the council, it's as good as gone." Mrs. Pritchard patted Avery's arm. "We need you, dear. You're good with people. Help us organize a petition, maybe a fundraiser at the bakery." Avery hesitated, the weight of her own struggles pressing down. She barely had time to keep Tide and Tart running, let alone save a lighthouse. But the thought of condos replacing Nora's fireflies was unbearable. "Okay," she said finally. "I'm in." As the two left, plotting strategies, Finn appeared at the foot of the stairs, his guitar nowhere in sight. He'd clearly overheard, his expression curious but cautious. "Lighthouse trouble?" he asked, leaning against the counter. Avery sighed, rubbing her temple. "Yeah, developers want to tear it down. It's personal." She didn't elaborate, but the ache in her voice betrayed her. Finn nodded, his teasing gone. "I saw it on my way in. It's beautiful. Anything I can do?" She studied him, surprised by the offer. His eyes were steady, and for a moment, she saw past the guitar and the grin to something solid, like an anchor in a storm. "Not unless you're secretly a lawyer," she said, forcing a smile. "Just keep the music down." He chuckled, but his gaze lingered. "Deal. But if you need a hand, I'm not just a noisy tenant. I'm pretty good with a petition." Avery's lips twitched, despite herself. "I'll keep that in mind." As Finn headed back upstairs, his footsteps lighter now, the bell jingled again with a new customer. Avery turned to the counter, the scent of scones and sea air wrapping around her. But Finn's offer, and the way his voice had softened, stirred something in her, a ripple she couldn't ignore. Outside, the waves crashed, and she wondered if Cliffhaven's tides were pulling her towards something she wasn't ready for. Chapter 3: Shadows on the Shore. Avery Lawson's sneakers crunched against the pebbled path leading to Cliffhaven's lighthouse, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the rocky shore. The air was heavy with salt and the faint sweetness of wild roses, their petals scattered along the trail. Seagulls wheeled overhead, their cries mingling with the rhythmic crash of waves against the cliffs below. She adjusted the stack of petition flyers under her arm, her braid swaying as she walked, and tried to ignore the man beside her. Finn Harbor's presence was like the tide, steady, inescapable, and a little too close for comfort. "You sure you don't need me to carry those?" Finn asked, his voice light but laced with that teasing edge she was starting to recognize. His navy t-shirt clung to his shoulders, and his binoculars hung around his neck, bouncing with each step. "I've got it," Avery said, clutching the flyers tighter. She'd agreed to let him tag along to the lighthouse only because Mrs. Pritchard had insisted Finn's newcomer charm might sway the locals to sign the petition. But now, with the sea breeze tugging at her hair and Finn's easy stride matching hers, she felt exposed, like the cliffs eroding under the waves. "Suit yourself," he said, his grin flashing. "But if you drop those in the ocean, I'm not diving in to save them." She rolled her eyes, but a reluctant smile tugged at her lips. "Noted. Just keep up, Harbor. I don't have all day." The path curved upward, the lighthouse coming into view, a white tower with a red stripe, perched like a sentinel against the endless blue. Its lantern room gleamed in the sunlight, and Avery's chest tightened. She and Nora used to race to its base as kids, laughing until their lungs burned, chasing fireflies under its beam. The thought of condos replacing it was a wound she couldn't stitch. Finn slowed, his gaze on the lighthouse. "It's something else," he said, almost to himself. "You can feel the history." "Yeah," Avery said, her voice softer than she meant. "It's been here forever. My sister." She stopped, the words catching like seaweed in her throat. She hadn't meant to mention Nora, not to him. Finn glanced at her, his eyes searching but gentle. "Your sister?" She shook her head, stepping faster. "Never mind. Let's just get these flyers posted." He didn't push, but his silence felt like an invitation, one she wasn't ready to accept. They reached the lighthouse, its iron door ajar, and Avery tacked a flyer to the bulletin board outside, her hands unsteady. The petition's bold letters, "Save Our Lighthouse," stared back, a reminder of how much was at stake. Finn leaned against the stone wall, watching her. "You're really fighting for this place," he said. "It's personal, isn't it?" She froze, her fingers lingering on the flyer. His voice was quiet, not teasing now, and it unnerved her how easily he saw through her. "It's my home," she said finally, turning to face him. This island, the lighthouse, the bakery, it's all I have left. He nodded, his expression softening. I get it. I lost something too. A research project went south last year. My fault. People got hurt. His jaw tightened, and he looked out at the sea, the waves glinting like broken glass. Cliffhaven's my chance to start over. Avery's breath caught. She hadn't expected him to share something so raw, and the weight of his words mirrored her own. For a moment, they stood there, the ocean's roar filling the silence, two people carrying ghosts they hadn't named. Starting over's hard, she said, her voice barely audible. But you don't seem like the type to mess up. His laugh was short, almost bitter. You'd be surprised, but I'm trying to do better. For what it's worth, I think you're doing a hell of a job with this. He gestured to the flyer, his eyes meeting hers, steady and warm. Her pulse quickened, and she looked away, focusing on the horizon. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky in pinks and golds, and the lighthouse's shadow stretched toward them. She wanted to say something, to bridge the gap his words had opened, but fear held her back. A shout broke the moment. Avery, Finn. Mrs. Pritchard's voice carried from the path, her floral shawl flapping as she hurried toward them. Good, you're here. The council's meeting early, tonight. We need more signatures. Avery's stomach dropped. Tonight? We're nowhere near ready. Mrs. Pritchard waved a hand, undeterred. Nonsense. You two are a team now. Finn, charm the socks off those locals. Avery, bring your fire. Finn chuckled, but Avery shot him a look. We're not a team, she muttered, though the words felt less certain than before. As Mrs. Pritchard dragged them back down the path, Finn's shoulder brushed hers, a fleeting warmth that sent a shiver through her. The lighthouse loomed behind them, its beam cutting through the dusk, and Avery felt the pull of something new, a spark she couldn't name, flickering in the shadows of her grief. Chapter 4. Storms on the horizon. Avery Lawson stood at the back of Cliffhaven's town hall, her arms crossed as the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow on the crowd. The room smelled of stale coffee and damp wood, the windows rattling from the evening sea breeze. Folding chairs were packed with locals, fishermen, shopkeepers, and summer tourists, murmuring about the fate of the lighthouse. Mrs. Pritchard was at the podium, her floral shawl a beacon of defiance, waving a petition like a flag. But Avery's stomach churned. The council meeting, hastily called to address the developer's bid, was spiraling into chaos, and the stack of signatures she'd gathered with Finn felt like a flimsy shield against the storm. Finn stood beside her, his shoulder close enough to brush hers, his binoculars replaced by a notepad where he'd scribbled talking points. His presence was steady, a contrast to the nervous energy in the room, but it only made her more aware of the warmth radiating from him. Their walk to the lighthouse yesterday, his quiet confession about his failed project, had cracked something in her, a wall she'd built since Nora's death. She didn't want to lean on him, but his offer to help tonight had been impossible to refuse. This is a disgrace. Mr. Callahan's voice boomed from the front, his beard quivering as he jabbed a finger at the council table. That lighthouse is Cliffhaven's heart. You can't sell it to some Portland suit. The crowd roared in agreement, but Councilman Reed, a wiry man with a pinched face, raised a hand. The developer's offer is substantial, he said, his voice oily. Condos mean jobs, revenue. We can't ignore progress. Avery's fists clenched. Progress? Erasing the lighthouse, where she and Nora had carved their initials in the fence, wasn't progress. It was theft. She stepped forward, her voice cutting through the noise. The lighthouse brings tourists. My bakery, every shop here, depends on it. You're trading our history for a quick buck. Heads turned, and Mrs. Pritchard beamed, but Reed's smirk made her skin crawl. Miss Lawson, your bakery's barely breaking even. Can you guarantee tourism will save it? Her cheeks burned, the truth stinging. Before she could retort, Finn's voice rang out, calm but firm. She's right. I'm new here, but even I can see the lighthouse is what makes Cliffhaven special. Studies show historic sites boost local economies by 15%. Condos? They'll empty out in winter. The room quieted, impressed by his confidence, and Avery shot him a surprised glance. He winked, subtle enough to make her heart skip, and she hated how it steadied her. Reed faltered, but another council member called for a vote, and the meeting dissolved into shouted arguments. Mrs. Pritchard hustled to rally signatures, while Avery's hope sank like a stone in the tide. She slipped outside, the cool night air a relief, the stars glittering above the harbor. Finn followed, his boots soft on the gravel. "You okay?" he asked, stopping beside her, his voice low against the distant waves. "No," she admitted, hugging herself. "I thought we had a chance, but Reed's got the council in his pocket. And he's right about the bakery. I'm drowning, Finn." He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the salt on his skin. "You're not drowning. You're fighting. That's more than most." His eyes held hers, warm and unflinching, and for a moment, the weight of her grief felt lighter. Her breath hitched, and she leaned toward him, drawn by the quiet strength in his gaze. His hand brushed her arm, a spark in the cool air, and the space between them shrank. She could almost taste the sea on his breath, and her heart pounded, torn between fear and want. A sharp honk shattered the moment. Headlights flared as a truck pulled up, and Mr. Callahan leaned out, his voice gruff. "Avery, Pritchard says your oven's acting up at the bakery. Sounds urgent." Avery jerked back, her face flushing. "The oven?" she muttered, panic rising. If Tide and Tart's oven died, she'd lose what little revenue she had. "I've got to go." Finn grabbed her elbow, his touch grounding. "I'll come with you. Might be a quick fix." She nodded, too rattled to argue, and they hurried to the bakery, the harbor's lights twinkling behind them. Inside, the oven was indeed silent, its pilot light out, and a tray of half-baked scones sat abandoned. Avery knelt, her hands shaking as she checked the gas line, while Finn grabbed a flashlight from his pocket, his calm presence a lifeline. "It's just the igniter," he said, peering over her shoulder. "I can rig it for tonight, but you'll need a technician." She exhaled, relief mixing with frustration. "Thanks," she said, meeting his eyes. The bakery was quiet, the only sound the faint lap of waves outside, and the memory of their almost moment lingered like sea foam. As Finn worked, Avery's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her heart sinking. A text from her landlord. "Rent's due end of month. No extensions." She set the phone down, her hands trembling, and realized that saving the lighthouse might cost her everything else, including the fragile spark she felt with Finn.